Hi, welcome to my presentation about Transmute in EDH. I'm EP. I've been playing Commander now for about 4 years on and off, and ever since I started, I've been in love with deck building in Commander. Even when I'm not playing the game actively, I'm building decks and testing them out, and yeah, I want to share my passion with people, and I want to teach you some of the things I've learned about deck building in my journey. Before I get into it, I want to give a big thank you to Flair. Flair is gone here on YouTube. I'll probably link the channel in the description for this video. I'm basically stealing this format from him, and I'm a big fan of his channel. Please go and check it out. Please give him some love. Because without him, I wouldn't really have been inspired to make this in the first place. So, yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so a brief introduction to Transmute as a mechanic. It debuted in Ravnica City of Guilds in 2005, and it was designed by Aaron Forsyth. So, Transmute is a keyword where you pay 3 mana and discard the card to tutor a card with equal mana value. An important thing to note here is that the cost is always 3. You can look at both of the cards here on the example. They have different mana pips, but the cost is the same. It's the same on all of the Transmute cards that have ever been printed. It always costs 3. There are only 14 Transmute cards in pay-per-play, and they're exclusive to Dimir colors. I think this is because it only showed up in the Ravnica block where it debuted, and it's not received any attention since, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, given that blue and black don't really need the extra tutoring support, and it's a pretty old and underpopulated mechanic, which is honestly part of the reason why I love it. So, the 2 cards I want to talk about the most here are the counter spells, Perplex and Muddle the Mixture. If you actually look at the pool of Transmute cards, you'll see pretty quickly that these 2 probably have the most applicable use. I mean, they're counter spells. You always want counter spells, right? But if we actually look at the cards themselves, I think Muddle the Mixture is a pretty average counter spell. It's slightly overcosted for what it is, but it's decent. Perplex, on the other hand, I think is kind of strong. And stay with me here, because, yeah, counterspell, it's 2 blue mana, counters any spell, that's it. No strings attached. But Perplex is only 1 mana extra. It counters any spells, and let's be honest, there are so few situations where your opponent will willingly discard their entire hand to negate this. If you factor that in, I'd argue that 95% of the time, this is just a counterspell for 1 extra mana. And it's EDH. Like, we can afford the extra mana here. When you consider that it has what is essentially a cost-specific demonic tutor attached to it, I think it kind of excuses the extra cost. You don't necessarily need a good effect attached to justify playing a Transmute card, but these are the ones that I think are worth playing for the effect and the Transmute mechanic. If you look at them, the effects are pretty overcosted, but they are good effects. You have destruction of a creature, you can bounce any permanent to its owner's hand. Dimir Machinations even, being able to look at your opponent's next few draws and just get rid of any that you don't want them to have, is kind of powerful. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about Teleria West in a second. I think in Commander, flexibility is so important. So much more than mana efficiency, actually, and personally, I would have no issue paying 5 mana to destroy a single creature if the situation called for it. And if you think about cards like Foul the Profane, the MDFC land, that's also a 5 mana single target destruction spell that is played for the flexibility. So if you're running a deck where you have a 5 mana finisher you're probably going to play Brain Spoil over Foul the Profane in that situation. And when you consider that, Brain Spoil becomes a lot more playable than it might look at first. Okay, please bear with me here because this is probably where my spotty commander knowledge will get in the way of me explaining this concept properly. I want to talk about Teleria West and its mana value, or lack thereof. I assumed at first that Teleria West could only search for other cards that didn't have any printed value, so other land cards or suspend cards like Lotus Bloom. That's not the case. It all converts to 0. That's the most basic way I can put it. If a card doesn't have a mana cost, meaning if it's an X cost like Stonecoil Serpent, or if it just lacks a mana cost altogether, it just converts to 0. Which means Teleria West can search out a lot of different cards. You can search out your Power Land, you can search out Mana Rocks. My personal favorite usage of this is to search out suspend cards. I don't know if I'd recommend that, but I enjoy it. I think if you're playing some of the more expensive commander cards out there, like the Mox Crystals, for example, being able to search those out, I think there is not much overlap between Transmute and people who can afford Mox Crystals, but it is there. If you consider that certain decks and some playstyles rely on searching a single card or combo, if you're only ever looking for a single finisher off of your tutor, it doesn't really matter how you get the tutor off, right? So, regardless of the effect of the card, every Transmute card has some relevance purely for their cost and the fact that you can convert them into another card of the same cost. I think this is a little bit more fringe, but when you're playing on a budget, the more affordable tutors you have access to, the better. For me personally, I'm a relatively budget player. Transmute sometimes is one of the only forms of accessing cards in my deck that I have. And I think it's to do with flexibility and accessibility. Having the option of this effect at such a low budget, it's great. I think it allows for more interesting deck building, and it's part of why I love this mechanic. Even cards like Grows Up here, who, I mean, if you actually read him, I feel like at some point Grows Up might have been a good card, but I think he's probably a little bit past his prime by now. But I love that you could still play this in your deck. Just placate me here for a second and let me talk about why I love Transmute. For me, as a player, flexibility in my cards comes first. I love modal cards, I love NDFCs, I love any card that just has more than one effect. And the more that a card can do, the better. It means that the amount of time I have dead cards in my hand is reduced, and that means that I'm able to make plays more often, which is pretty important in a game. So even if I have to pay nearly double the cost for an effect, in most cases, the higher cost is worth it just for the ability to answer the situation in the first place. And just touching on the budget element here, it's so much cheaper than so many other tutors. Almost every tutor, even Profane Tutor, for example, is one of my favorite tutors because I think it's relatively budget. Even that card is a little bit expensive, and for some players, they need access to cards that only cost a few pennies, which most of the Transmute cards do. So I want to talk about deck building now and building around Transmute. I mean, we talked about it plenty already. Transmute, you know what it does. You convert the card into a different card of the same cost, which means you can manipulate how usable that effect is through your deck building. I'm just going to pull up a recent deck I made here as an example, because I really like to put Transmute into my decks, if you couldn't tell. On the top, you have Muddle the Mixture. Underneath, you have every card in my deck that it can grab. And this is a 2-mana counterspell. Don't forget that. This is a usable card. that, if it happens to sit in my hand, can then go and grab me any one of these cards. And if you actually look at some of the names in this list, these are pretty essential commander cards here. You have Lightning Greaves Counterspell, things like Collective Resistance and Assassin's Trophy. Like, Mesmeric Orb is a really powerful card in this deck. Like, having access to these cards through a card that can offer me protection and safety in game if I need it is just fantastic to me. And yeah, you can really improve the value that you're able to get from transmute cards just by changing your deck building a little bit. For example, having 3-cost mana rocks so that you can then search them more easily. It's just about finding more opportunities to turn the transmute card online. Also, if you can guess what my commander is for this deck list, I will pin the comment. So yeah, that's just a few of the reasons why I love this mechanic, and I think it's so underrated. I really hope that this video inspires you to at least test it out. You know, maybe swap out that counterspell in your deck for a Muddle the Mixture and see if it comes up. See if you end up searching an Arcane Signet to ramp yourself. I think it's great that these cards are so flexible. I think it's great that they're affordable, and I think that it adds a new element to deck building that, if you so choose to engage with it, can be very rewarding. For good reason, Wizards probably won't ever reprint this effect, at least not on new cards. Mark Rosewater said in a blogger talk that I will probably link in the description that the design philosophy is generally just moving away from tutoring effects, which I don't disagree with. I think if you printed Transmute on some of the cards from this year, it would be game breaking. I think they would just be auto includes in most commander decks that they would fit into. I think it's a good decision to move away from those effects. And yeah, I just love this pool of cards. They're old, they have crazy art, and honestly, just some of them are really useful. Some of them are just good cards, and yeah, it feels like a little treasure of mine because I never see other people playing Transmute, and I think more people should because tutors are really strong. And yeah, that's it for now. Thank you so much for just sticking around and letting me ramble about a mechanic that I really love. And again, I have to shout out Flair here. This format was completely, I mean, it's basically the same. If you go and watch a video by Flair, it's very similar. I love the format. It's enjoyable to me, and I wanted to bring it to some other people in my own way. And please feel free to comment anything you want me to do a presentation for. A mechanic, even a color maybe. I don't know. This is just a little passion project of mine to celebrate a game I love, and if there's something you want me to talk about, if I can figure out things to say about it, I'll do it. And thank you so much for just sticking around and supporting the start of this channel, I guess. And yeah, I hope I'll see you in the next one. Bye!